Preparing. Preparing. And we're live.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here tonight with one of the great living composers, David Lang, acclaimed Pulitzer Prize winner, founder of Bang on a Can. He's great. I've had the pleasure of working with him a number of times, and he's just a wonderful composer and a wonderful person. So I'm gonna hand this over to David. If folks have questions, type them into the chat on the YouTube Live, and I'll be able to see them and read them out loud when the time comes. So for now, David Lang.
Hey there. Am I live? You can see me and hear me? Okay. Hey there, I'm David Lang. I'm so used to being on Zoom that I'm used to seeing a million people who look at me and then I can tell immediately if I'm there. But since this is YouTube Live, I don't have a clue if you were there, but if you are there, I am very happy. Thanks for the introduction, Kivi. It is true. Kivi and I have worked together many times and I'm really happy to be here. And Kivi asked me to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And so I decided I wanted to talk about something that was going on right before the pandemic interrupted my life and interrupted your life too. And that was, I had just written a giant opera that had just been premiered by the New York Philharmonic, and then had one stop of a giant European tour before all activity was shut down. And this is an opera called Prisoner of the State. So I do lots of different kinds of things. I'm a professor, I write music, I'm one of the founders along with Michael Gordon and Julia Wolf of Bang on a Can. I do lots of different kinds of things. But in my heart, I consider myself to be an opera composer. I really love that you can use all of your skills as a composer. You are dealing with music, melody, text, drama, lighting, costume, character, basically everything that you have learned to do as a composer. You have to bring all of those skills and experiences together in order to do opera. So once I started doing opera, I sort of got the bug, and now I have the bug. So one of my interests is doing opera in places where we don't expect it to be. So we're used to opera houses being the place where we find opera, which is great. That is great that things happen there. But sometimes it's nice to put operas in different places where we don't expect them. So I have written an opera on the High Line in New York, the big public park, called the Mile Long Opera, where actually you walk along a mile and a half long from the bottom to the top of the High Line. And there are 1,000 singers, each of them with his or her own aria singing to you as you walk by. I've written operas in all sorts of weird places. One of the pieces that I did with Kivi was an opera with Ice Ensemble in New York called the Whisper Opera, which is an opera that is so quiet that no one can actually hear what it's about. And so it has to be in its own specially designed stage, its own special place. When the singers walk by you, whispering the text, you get a little sense of what it's about, but because it's so quiet, your sense is very different from the sense of the person sitting just a few seats away from you. And so your experience is unique and it is yours alone. So these are things that do the same thing that opera does. They use music to make a character deep, but they're in places where we don't expect necessarily to have that experience. The piece that I'm going to share with you today is a piece called Prisoner of the State, and it's a rewriting of Beethoven's opera Fidelio, Beethoven's only opera. He only wrote one, right? he wasn't that happy with it, and he ended up rewriting it a couple of times. And so that sort of gave me permission to do this piece, because it's a piece that has some flaws. Forgive me, I don't mean to sound, like that's hubris or something, but the flaws are sort of baked into the piece, and they're interesting. And one of the flaws is that Beethoven, sort of in the shadow of the, to him, recent French Revolution, is thinking about freedom, and is thinking about politics, and is thinking about what happens when the state imprisons people for their opinions. It's a very important topic, and unfortunately, it's a topic that is very important to us to this day. And Beethoven courageously decided that this was something that he wanted to do in his opera Fidelio. The problem was he was not living in an environment where he could go straight to that subject. And so he manages to tell the story kind of obliquely. And it begins with something which is from the comic opera tradition. So the story you may know, but I'll repeat it. The story is a man has been imprisoned for his political opinions. His wife, Leonora, disguises herself as a man and takes the name Fidelio, meaning, trustworthy, right? Or, devoted and trustworthy. And she gets a job in a jail, in a prison, in the hope that maybe this is the prison where her husband has been imprisoned. And somehow she thinks she may be able to free her husband. She has spent 2 years on this job so far, and only now, when the action of the opera comes to us during the course of this opera, after 2 years of working at this prison, is she close enough to be able to see if the prisoner who is being held downstairs in the dungeons is actually her husband. All of this is amazing. All of this is incredible. And all of this is rightly, kind of Beethoven's statement about freedom. But because he's trying to hide this story to protect himself so that he can make an opera that gets this political point across, he hides it in a domestic story. So for 2 years, Fidelio has been living as a man in the home of the jailer, where the jailer's daughter mistakenly thinks that Fidelio is a man and is in love with him. And there are discussions about marriage between the daughter and between Fidelio, because Fidelio has to play along that he's a man. And there's jealousy from the daughter's former boyfriend. So these kinds of tropes are taken from comic opera: mistaken identity, switching gender roles, a woman in trousers. These are called trouser roles in opera. These are things that are taken from comic opera from the 18th century. And everyone in Beethoven's audience would know that this is a funny story. And in fact, the opera begins as a funny domestic story. And then when we get into the prison story, it becomes dark. I saw a production of this piece when I was 20 or 21. And I had already heard that Fidelio was Beethoven's great statement about freedom, and there's a great moment where the chorus comes out and sings one of Beethoven's most famous pieces, a very beautiful chorus, where the choir is, the prisoners are let out into the sunlight, and automatically these prisoners who are thieves and murderers and burglars and rapists somehow manage to sing about how great it is to be free and how ennobled they are that they are in the sun. And it's a beautiful aria. It's really important. It's really great. At the end of the aria, through all sorts of things, at the end of the opera, through all sorts of procedures, which are hard to believe, the prisoner is freed. It is her husband. She finds her husband. She manages to free her husband. She manages to overthrow the evil tyrant. And at that moment, when the townspeople come out, you would like them to say how important it is that people should be free. And you would like them to come out and say, down with tyranny, and how important it is for the human spirit that we should all be just. But instead, in order to round out the story and to remind us of where we began, the chorus, instead of singing about how much we love freedom, sings, God bless the man who has a loving wife. And if you have a loving wife, please sing along with us. So at the end of this piece, which is supposed to be about freedom and justice and prisoners, it ends up being turned back into being, no, it's not about that at all. It's about how much a woman loves her husband. And that's the way Beethoven hides the story so that his audience, and to be honest, so that his patrons, because he's not living in a democracy. He's not living in a place where one can have a free opinion. He's living, under a king. And so the idea of living in a just society is a complicated one for him, and he can't go all the way to where he needs to go. So I remember when I was 21, I had this perverse idea. I really liked that idea that we would have somebody who would dedicate their lives to freeing a prisoner and to thinking about prisoners and to thinking about justice. We need an opera like that. That would be really great. This is not that opera. I mean, it doesn't go all the way. Maybe someday when I grow up, I can rewrite this opera and I can make it good. And, I can follow those promises where they go and see where they lead, So I've been thinking of this piece, for over 40 years before someone let me do it. And that's the weird thing about being a composer is you have these crackpot ideas, and eventually, if you are lucky, maybe someone will help you do them. And so 40 years later, the New York Philharmonic and a consortium of European presenters commissioned me to be able to rewrite Fidelio. And this is a piece which I did called Prisoner of the State. It cuts out all the domestic story, it cuts out all the love, it cuts out all the secondary stories, the mistaken identity, and it goes straight to what I thought was the heart of the story, which is this woman deciding that she needs to free her husband, and through that decision, coming to the decision that she needs to dedicate herself to all those prisoners, and that all those prisoners matter to her, and that her commitment to them is about a commitment to a kind of world that she would like to live in, and not, God, once I get my husband out of here, I'm gone. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to play some excerpts from this. And the first one I'm going to play is just a general overview from the opening night. These are all on YouTube, also on the New York Philharmonic channel. I will say I put this in the New York Philharmonic, right? So it's not in an opera hall, even though it's an opera. It's done with an orchestra on stage. And you'll see the set from this, this video that's like a minute and a half long. You'll see the music is from the very end of the piece, but you will see little excerpts from the piece, and you'll get to see the characters, and you will see the orchestra on stage, and you'll see that they're in barbed wire and a cyclone fence with barbed wire on top. You'll see that there's a platform, and there are prisoners in prison costumes, and the prisoners are present in every scene in the opera. And the last thing is I'll just tell you who the characters are. There is the woman who has dressed herself as a man, and she is called in my opera the assistant. There is the jailer, and he is called the jailer. There is the prisoner, and he is called the prisoner. And there is the evil head of state, who is called the governor. And then there's a choir, there's an orchestra, Jaap van Zweden, and the New York Philharmonic. And let's watch this little video.
Thank you.
Okay, well, hopefully you got a little sense of what it looks like there. And I should say the director is Elkanah Pulitzer. And it was super fun to do. It was super exciting. What I did for the text was I went through Beethoven's libretto. So Beethoven rewrote this piece 3 times. So there are lots of different variants of the libretto. And I took out all the things that I thought were off the topic of how this woman relates to these prisoners and the lives of the prisoners. And then I took all the things out that weren't on that topic, and then I added some things back in that I rewrote myself. And I rewrote Beethoven's libretto, and then I rewrote some things myself. And I looked at those things as being kind of hyperlinks. So I found things from other texts that were informative about the world that Beethoven was in and the world of these prisoners. So for example, I wanted to describe what the prison looked like and what the prison philosophy was at the beginning, to set the scene, where are we? So just before Beethoven wrote this opera, the first version was in 1805, from 10 years earlier. There's the treatise, which is the founding of the modern prison, the Panopticon by the English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. And so I set to music his description of what he was thinking when he described what has become the modern prison for us. And this is a place where cells can be put in such a way so that fewer guards are needed and you can see them all. You can see all the prisoners from fewer locations. And creepily, what Jeremy Bentham says is this is really great for everything in our lives. It's great for running people in factories, in schools, in the rest of our life. If we have people in environments like this where they're in little cubicles and people can watch them and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, then we can control everyone everywhere. Likewise, I wanted to know who these prisoners were. There's very little curiosity about who the rest of the prisoners are in Beethoven. And so I thought it's really important to know who they are and what their crimes are. So I found a list from 1805, from the same year that the piece was premiered, of crimes in London that people were transported for, because in England, they didn't have prisons, they had prison ships. And what they did is when they found a prisoner who they thought they couldn't rehabilitate, they would put that prisoner on a boat and send that prisoner to Australia. And so I just found a manifest list from one of those boats that had the list of what those criminals were guilty of. So my prisoners come out and they go, I stole a lady's purse, I stole a piece of cloth, I stole a loaf of bread. It's just the list of crimes that I found on that sheet. And this goes on through the whole piece. There are texts that are taken from other kinds of things. I'm going to show you 3 arias from the piece. There are videos up on YouTube that are with piano, so I don't have videos of people singing them live. So with the orchestra accompaniment, but I think you'll get a sense of what they are like from these videos with the piano. And the first one is going to be the assistant's aria, where she is singing this is the way the opera opens, is the stage is dark and she comes out, she is dressed like a man and she comes out with a bucket to start, cleaning the floor. And she comes out into a little island that we built out into the middle of the orchestra, in the middle of the audience. And then she looks up and she tells you a little bit about what her life was like. She was a totally, harmless person before her husband was taken, and then her life changed. So this is an aria called "I Was a Woman," and let's hear it. I was a woman.
I was a woman once. It was so long ago. I barely remember it. women I lived as women live. I felt as women feel. I dressed the way a woman does. I was a woman once. I wore my hair the way a woman does. I sang the way a woman does. I breathed the air the way a woman breathes the air. And I laughed the way a woman laughs. When they took my love away, I died the way a woman dies. I died the way a woman dies. I died the way I don't remember his face. I don't remember his name. I don't remember his love. But I remember I was a woman once.
Okay, that was Julie Mathieu. And now we're going to hear an aria called Gold. And it is sung by the jailer, who is played by Eric Owens. And this is interesting. To me, this is sort of like the one of the central decisions that I had to make in changing this opera, because and this was something that was a problem for me when I was 21 and I saw this opera. So the jailer in Fidelio is named Rocco. It's his daughter who's in love with Fidelio. And Rocco is a kind of bumbling jailer. And in one of the later editions of this opera, Beethoven added a comic aria for him. You know, Beethoven was not known for his sense of humor. And so this is a kind of clumsy song about, he's talking to his daughter and to Leonora, to Fidelio, about how when they get married together, they're going to need money. And he sings this really funny song about, you know, about gold, about how they're going to need some gold. And it's very clunky, and it's you know, his attempt at being funny. And my first impulse was to cut this because it's sort of problematic. And, you know, when people want to make fun of this opera, you know, they point to that. They go, that's, you know, kind of like something that doesn't work. And then I realized actually that in a way, the jailer's character is kind of important for the story. And it's important because he is the person who's imprisoned the prisoner of the state. He's imprisoned Fidelio's husband, Leonora's husband. And he's perfectly happy to starve this person, and he's perfectly happy to help kill him. And he's perfectly happy to help dig him a grave when the evil Pizarro, who's the governor, decides that he's going to come down and kill him. He's perfectly happy to do that. You know, he's a bumbling family man, and for money, for his job, he's perfectly happy to do this. So I remember being shocked when I saw this production for the first time when I was 21, that in my mind, he's a bad character. He's totally enabling the torture of this prisoner, and he's totally fine with the fact that Pizarro is killing him. He says he's not going to kill him, but if you want to kill him, that's okay, you know. And then at the end of the opera, when this, you know, kind of great ending happens, where the prisoners are saved, and the townspeople come out and they sing how great it is to be married, and they haul off the evil governor Pizarro. They haul him off. There's Rocco. There's the jailer. And there he is with his daughter and with his family. And he's super happy. And he actually, you know, gets redeemed somehow by the fact that he didn't have to help kill the guy, right? But he would have killed the guy. And why would he have killed the guy? You know, it's kind of like a central question for me. It's like, what's his role there? And then I realized, you know, he's actually telling us his ethical code when he sings this song. He's telling us, I have a job, you know, I need this job. This is how I pay my family, right? You know, it's a terrible job, but it's my job, and this is what I have to do it. So I rewrote this song. I rewrote Beethoven's libretto so that it would be more cynical and also more honest. You know, he is there because he is being paid to be there. And once he has enough money, you know, he's done, right? You know, that's why he's there. So I changed the text from being this kind of, you know, funny comic thing to being the statement really that's kind of like my imagining where most of us are, right? You know, we're in this world and lots of horrible things happen in the world, and we try to pay attention to as many as we can, and we try to do something about it if we want to actually engage our moral compass. But we can't do everything, you know, and we can't be every place, and we can't be as good as we'd like to be. And why can't we be that good, right? Well, he's our stand-in, or he's at least my stand-in for what I imagine my role in this kind of world would be. Not that I would be a jailer, but, you know, this kind of trying to figure out how to deal with something where there's evil in the world and what's your relationship to it. That's kind of his role. So let's hear this aria, Gold, sung by Aria.
In this world, without gold, you can't live, you can't be happy. Without gold, in this world, with gold in your pocket, power and love, power and love. Without gold, someone else will get the power and the love, the power and the love. Love is a slave to gold, love is a slave to gold, life is a slave to gold. In this world, you pay for luck, you pay for love, you pay for life itself. When you see a man with luck, with love, with life, you know he has the gold, he has the gold. When you love someone, and what is in your empty pockets to hers, if it's nothing, all you have is nothing. If all you have to eat is love, you will always be hungry. In this world, your true love, your real love, the love you hold the tightest in your arms, is gold. In your arms, in your purse, in your pockets, in your bed. If you want to live, you will need gold. When I get enough, I'll be gone.
So I'm not totally sure who did the subtitles on this, but it's like they're translated from the original German, I guess. I don't know. There's something weird going on there. So not all those words were in the right place, but you get the picture, right? So the last thing I'm going to play, and then I hope that you will be able to put some questions for me, and then Kivi will check the questions in the comment section from YouTube. And hopefully there will be some questions. And if not, that's totally fine too. No pressure. Okay. But the last one is, one of the great joys of writing opera, I think, at least for me, is I get to identify with every character. I love writing the text, I love writing the music, and I love thinking about who these things are. And I love trying to put myself in their position, like, who am I? What would I be if I am the woman in the first, in the opening? It's like I'm not too aware of something, and then something happened to me that radicalized me, and how would I feel? Well, I would look at my previous life as being really silly, and I would look at my new life as being really serious. Would I be as the jailer? I would be rationalizing to myself how I could be part of such an evil system. When you're writing opera and your characters are evil, that's also really interesting, because none of us are good or bad. Well, at least speaking for me, I don't know about you. You might be completely good, right? But I try to imagine again, what this man was totally evil would think about his own life. Is he really totally evil, or is he just reflexively being as bad as he can be, or does he have a worldview? And so I thought, I want to know what this guy's thinking. So I reread Machiavelli, The Prince, to find out how someone in a position of power imagines ruling, what it's like to use fear and violence and force and torture. What use is that to the state? And so I decided to make a text out of Machiavelli's famous dictum: it is better to be feared than to be loved. And this is a famous quote, which many of you may know about what Machiavelli says. But what's interesting about it when you read it in The Prince is it's a rational discussion for Machiavelli. He doesn't just say be feared because it's really good to be feared. He qualifies it. He thinks about it. He actually goes, well, here's the problem. Like, the problem when you have a world based on love is that you can't depend on anyone because no one is afraid of you. right? You can't make everybody do what you want them to, what you want them to do. And so it's actually not efficient to be loved. So this is the evil governor. Well, his name is just the governor. He's not the evil governor. He's the governor. And he has this great moment where he gets to come out to the edge of the stage, and he looks at the audience and he just sings this thing, which I want it to be as beautiful as possible. So that he's thinking, right? In my experience, the evil people are in many cases more thoughtful than the good people, because the evil people have figured out how to take advantage of other people, and that takes some thinking, some skill, some commitment, and some cleverness, right? It doesn't take any cleverness to be good, right? But these people have thought really hard about how to be really good at being evil, and this is one of those moments. So here is the English tenor Alan Oak singing Better to Be Feared.
Better to be feared than to be loved. It is better to be feared than to be loved. Men are fragile, men are liars, men are cowards, men want money. When times are good, they will be yours, but if you need them, they will be gone. Better to be feared than to be loved. It is better to be feared than to be loved. Love is a bond that men will break if they can gain something by breaking it. But fear, a man who fears you will never leave your side. Better to be feared than to be loved. If you can't be loved, be feared.
Well, those are 3 arias from my opera, Prisoner of the State. And now I'm wondering if there are any questions.
Yeah, we've already got a couple of questions in the chat. Are you currently working on any projects? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I'm working on a bunch of stuff. I have a bunch of stuff going on all the time. And there's the project I'm working on at this very moment is a piece for this really great vocal ensemble in England called the Tallis Scholars. And this is a piece called Sun-Centered, and it begins with a speech of Galileo, where he's trying to explain why it is that people around him are denying the science of the fact that the Earth revolves around the sun. And basically, it's about why people deny science. So it's, this, it has texts from the physicist Richard Feynman. It has texts from the political philosopher Hannah Arendt. It has a little bit of the Bible in it, and it has some Galileo. So it should be really fun, and that's going to premiere in April in Carnegie Hall and a bunch of other places. So that's what I'm working on, and I have a couple of other operas coming, and I'm having fun. Yeah.
Cool.
I have music. Actually, I have music for a film that's opening tonight. Actually, because I did music for a film by this filmmaker Bill Morrison, and the film is called The Village Detective. That music is available on Cantaloupe Records, but the film actually opens tonight. It opens. It probably the film started half an hour ago.
You're missing it to do this.
Yeah, I've seen it. But it opened, it's going to have, I don't know if it's coming to a theater near you, but eventually, if we open up the definition of near, it may be coming to a theater near you. And it's a beautiful documentary about decayed film, and should be really fun.
Cool. What does your composition process look like?
My composition process, as you might have gathered from the way I talked, I like to think about what I'm doing. Like some composers are very musical, and their composition process is they sit down at the piano and their hands go like this, and miraculously something really beautiful happens. And that's not my process. My process is I have to think really hard about something and have an idea and work out the idea and meticulously plan it and drink a lot of coffee and spend months scribbling in notebooks. And so my process is a lot of, kind of pre-compositional, head stuff and text stuff. And then writing the notes down is the very last thing I do. It's the very last thing. These are all sort of high concept kinds of things. And so the very last thing I do is try to imagine what it sounds like. The first thing is how does everything work? How does everything relate to each other? And what could it possibly mean?
I just got an email question. What do you listen to for pleasure? And has it changed over the years?
I think there's a way in which I may not be alone in this, but I think this may be universal, but I think the music that you listen to when you're like 18 years old is probably the music that you stay with your entire life. So I listen to a lot of music, and I listen to a lot of contemporary music. I listen to a lot of pop music. I listen to a lot of stuff, and I have 3 children in their 20s, so I listen to a lot of their music. But when I have to relax, I have to say I put on Bob Dylan, and then I'm super happy. So like when I have to copy music or something, I put on Bob Dylan really loud, and I know that that's because it got to me originally at a moment when I really needed it, and I still have it. So
cool. I'm waiting on more questions in the chat. They're about 20 seconds behind us right now. So
okay.
So I've got a question. Does your door still have the graffiti on it left over from back when Soho was cool?
So I live in a loft building in Soho, and Soho in New York, downtown New York, was an artist protected area, and it still is theoretically an artist protected area. It was a bunch of old deserted warehouses and shops and stores that got taken over by artists. Then galleries started moving to the neighborhood, and it became super hip. Then stores came to the neighborhood, and so my neighborhood is now where Gucci and Yves Saint Laurent and Bloomingdale's and Coach. And I mean, every store in our neighborhood is now, every building is a fixed up fancy store. The neighborhood is impassable because it's crowded with tourists and shoppers. So it's not really much of a neighborhood anymore. And all the really neighborhood things like restaurants and cafes, whatever, a lot of them have left. But in the middle of all of this shopping and all of this, expensive glitter and glamour, there's one broken down building, that often has graffiti on the door, and that's my building. Because theoretically, you're supposed to be an artist to live in this neighborhood. So we are protected, and we live in this neighborhood. We've been here for 30 years, and I moved to New York specifically to move to this neighborhood because when I was 15 years old, or 16, I discovered the music of Steve Reich and the music of Philip Glass when they were just, young. No one knew who they were. And I, found a record of, Steve Reich's first record. And I started getting into all this weird music. And then someone who knew a little bit more than I did said, all the composers you're checking out, this is the mid-70s, right? All the composers you're interested in, Philip Glass and Steve Reich and John Cage and Meredith Monk, Lamont Young, they all live within a few blocks of each other in Lower Manhattan. And I remember thinking when I was, 16 years old, growing up in Los Angeles, someday I'm going to live in that neighborhood. So I've lived in this neighborhood for over 40 years now, which is really kind of amazing.
That's awesome. We have a couple more questions in the chat now. Any general advice for writing? I'm planning on being a jazz writer and find myself hitting writer's block quite quickly. I'm still learning, but I'd love to hear as much advice as I can get.
Yeah, writer's block is a real problem, and I have a really great solution for how to get over it. And it's going to sound really stupid, but I really mean it, right? I think we get writer's block because we think that everything we write should be good, right? So you want to write something down and you don't want to do it until it's good, and you put something down and it's not as good as you want it to be. So you get a little paralyzed by the fact that what you are putting down isn't where you want it to be. The secret to getting over writer's block is to write bad music, So just get over the fact that everything has to be good, write something bad, anything down, and then look at it and ask yourself how to fix it. Because it's much easier to fix something and make it better than to start from nothing and make something good. So, and that goes for everybody at every level. And, I rewrite all of my pieces. So even, for me, I've been writing music since I was 9 years old. So I've had a lot of practice, and I'm pretty confident at my ability to, kind of get to where I want to go. And I begin by writing stuff. You write it down and then you go, well, that doesn't work. What would make it work? Well, I could, change that note. I could make this value longer. I could get rid of the second half of that phrase. What would make it better? That thing's nice, this little thing. I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to put a measure of rest here because it needs a little way to breathe, and pretty soon what you discover is you have something that's the beginning of something that you might like. So I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make something because we're making something out of nothing. And it's personal, right? It comes from you, right? So you think anything that you put down has to express you, right? It has to be good. It has to go exactly to the core of who you are. It has to be, absolutely perfect and efficient at saying what it is you need to say. That's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves. And so I think things you do to take the pressure off make it easier to actually, paradoxically get to that place.
Cool. There's a question about who are your greatest influences. You've already talked about the sort of the post-minimalist generation that you moved to New York for, and Dylan. Anyone who would surprise us?
Well, I'm a huge fan of the French composer Hector Berlioz, right? So I actually, you know, like I'm a music. I love all different kinds of music, and I when I grew up, I played in a rock band, I played in a jazz band. You know, I played bugle in the Boy Scouts for flag raising. You know, I loved music, and I wanted to do whatever I could, right? So so I played in orchestras, I played in marching band. I've done, you know, a lot of stuff, right? Just because I love music. So I think what's important is to look at all different kinds of things and see where the influences are, what's useful to you, you know? And so I don't really want to go and say, oh, here's one composer who's really meaningful or really special or whatever. But I think just being open to the lesson that you can learn. I think one thing that's really great about music is that even though music is different from culture to culture, and we, you know, music is not a universal language, but it is kind of a universal activity, you know. And one of the things that's universal about it is that people do it with each other, right? So whatever culture, whatever the meaning of, you know, music from any society or any group or any genre or any style, it's something that people do to share for some reason with someone else. And so when you look at it that way, I feel like you understand something about how people get along with each other and how they use music to kind of bridge gaps between each other in every part of the world and in every culture. And I would even, you know, probably, you know, ridiculously say in all time. Like, I think we have a secret insight as musicians into, you know, how early religious societies work or how cavemen work or whatever, you know, because music was something that they used in order to communicate important messages to each other. So I think if we're open to those messages from other music, you know, we'll get them.
That's great. Any other questions in the chat? I'll convey the person who asked the question about writer's block wrote, thanks, I actually wrote some joke music last year to learn how to use my recording software, and it actually turned out not too bad after I gave it time and thought.
Sometimes the joke stuff is the best stuff because it's music where you're not holding yourself to do anything but enjoy yourself, you know? And so sometimes at those moments we're actually freer. So I'm glad to hear that.
If there are any other questions, now is a good time to ask them.
Well, we almost made an hour.
We almost made an hour. I'll give people just a few more seconds to type something out while anyone's thinking of more questions. I'll just say we've got more Pipino series guests that'll all be live. The Tanglewood Marionettes on October 9th, guitarist Renee Izquierdo on November 14th, toy pianist Phyllis Chen on January 29th, Quarteto Latino Americano February 19th, and Karim Suleiman, an amazing early music tenor, and Yiheng Yang, they're going to do some Schubert on March 26th. And those flyers are all over the building. The Dana Ensemble has a concert in about 2.5 weeks, October 3rd, Soldier's Tale and Walton's Facade. And that'll be a lot of fun. And thanks so much to David Lang for being with us tonight. It's been such a pleasure.
Well,
having you getting to chat with you again.
Thanks to you, Kivi, and thanks, Sharon, for lining everything up. And thanks to all the Youngstonians. Is that what you call yourselves?
That's a good question. I think so.
But thank you very much. I really enjoyed you giving me the opportunity to talk about myself for an hour, and I apologize if I went on too long or
it was wonderful.
Okay. Thanks so much. I'll see you all in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.